Hello, Broncos fans, and welcome to another week of Orange Weekly After Dark, brought to you by Pigskin Podcast. Go ahead and start posting all your comments, questions, thoughts on the game that we had against the Ravens, or even thoughts that you might have coming up against the Steelers this upcoming week. And we will start talking Broncos football here in just a minute. But first, again, brought to you by Pigskin Podcast. We got a deal going for you guys right now through DraftKings Sportsbook, which is the official sports betting partner of the NFL. They have a Week 5 offer going on right now for every football fan that you guys should jump on. Brand new customers, if you just bet one simple dollar on any NFL game, you can win $100 in free bets if either team scores a single point in that game. In case you were wondering, the last time a game was finished in a 0-0 tie in the NFL was in 1943. So I would go ahead and say that this is probably about as safe as a bet as you can get. If Sportsbook isn't available in your state yet, don't worry. DraftKings won't leave you empty-handed. Everyone can still play for huge cash prizes all season long through the DraftKings Daily Fantasy Sports Contest. They are giving all new customers a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with their first deposit. So what do? Pretty simple. You just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Use promo code TPPN. Throw down $1, just one simple dollar on any NFL game. And again, you can win over $100 in free bets if either team scores a point. Again, promo code TPPN this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, which is, again, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 years or older. Again, it's for new customers only. Minimum $5 deposit, $1 wager required, one per customer. Restrictions do apply. Go and see DraftKings.com/sportsbook for more details. And don't forget that if you do have a gambling problem or know someone has a gambling problem, there are resources for you. All you have to do is call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, guys, we're going to move into discussing the Broncos game. And Fidel, thanks for joining us tonight. Ow is exactly the best summary that I think anyone could possibly come up with after that performance. The Broncos got absolutely punched in the face, kicked in the gut, whatever you want to say. They were beat handedly by the Baltimore Ravens outside of maybe the first quarter. But quarters 2 through 4, it was pretty evident who the better team yesterday was, and that was the Baltimore Ravens. So what do I think about yesterday's performance? It was a bit of a wake-up call for this team, I think. I talked about before the game in our tailgate talk with Jared that I think it was a good measuring stick for this team to see exactly how far they've come. And, obviously the talk going into the game was how easy the Broncos schedule had been, and how they're not really a good team. And I think that what we learned yesterday is, one, that there is still a gap, right, between us and a Super Bowl contender, because that's what the Ravens are, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that the Ravens aren't a legit team this year. Any team that goes in Arrowhead and beats Kansas City right now, I think is a Super Bowl contender. So the Ravens are a legit team and have a shot at the Super Bowl. And so we're not there yet. The Broncos might be a playoff team, and I think they still will make the playoffs this year. But as far as Super Bowl contender, obviously there's still that gap, and we saw that yesterday. What I would say, though, on top of that, and Fidel, thank you for your comments. You're at the game, and the first quarter looked so good, and it did. And I think that's where the main difference between the two teams was, and that was the Broncos beat themselves more than the Ravens beat the Broncos. The Broncos, they didn't look their best. There were simple. Fidel, I just saw your new comment. I'll get to that in a second. The Broncos beat themselves. How many times did we see a drop pass? I think it was Albert O had that one slip through his hands on that deep ball early in the game. But drop passes multiple times. Absolutely horrendous horrendous pass protection. And yeah, we were missing 2 starting tackles or starting guards, I believe. But the Ravens were rushing 4 players and were still hitting our quarterbacks, which I think is just inexcusable at the NFL level for that much of a rush consistently throughout the game. And so that was a big issue. Our running game went absent after the first bit. And what I mean by absent is they literally stopped calling run plays. We only rushed the ball 4 times in the entire second half. And so, some of that had to do with Drew Lock coming to the game. Honestly, I'm not sure why we didn't run it more though. But so play calling was a bit of an issue, and overall just lack of awareness, lack of concentration, lack of competition, and lack of competitiveness is what I saw from the Broncos yesterday. And that's not what I think the team is this year. I think it was a bad performance for sure against a really good team, and that's where those seemingly small mistakes that you make at the time are really magnified when you play a team such as the Baltimore Ravens. They make you pay. They make you pay for those mistakes. They make you pay for the mistake of, your 2 safeties, your zone coverage, and you just let one of their best guys run right by you and sit wide open in the end zone. They're continuing to have, and this is the story of the last several years, having issues covering tight ends. Andrews had a big game and had a touchdown taken away from him, which again, wide open in the end zone. And the only reason why it was taken back was for a offensive face mask penalty. And so, but again, it was, majorly broken coverage of a guy who was wide open in the end zone. Simple mistakes that you cannot make against great teams. And that's what we saw yesterday. As far as the run game goes, Javonte Williams is going to steal Melvin Gordon's job quite possibly. I think they both had a pretty decent game yesterday, though. Obviously, Javonte Williams had that fantastic run that I was hoping was really going to spark the offense and keep things moving throughout the rest of the game. But so far it's been a pretty 50-50 split between those 2 backs. Gordon's had some good runs, Williams has had some good runs, but they've also had some, bits where neither of them were doing their job either. So I'm curious to see how this one develops throughout the year. I definitely do believe at this point, I don't think one has truly separated themselves from the other. I think Javonte Williams is absolutely the back of the future for the Broncos here. And so expect to see more of him as the years go by. However, this year, I do think that they're going to try to maintain that 50-50 split as much as they can in order to keep both backs healthy, rested, and fatigue free towards the end of the season. How many times do you see a workhorse running back at the end of the season just kind of wear out, fatigue, and aren't nearly as effective at the end of the season as they are at the start of the season? And so I do think that's the benefit the Broncos have of having 2 pretty equal backs right now. And so I do expect them to still split the ball pretty evenly. Fidel, here's the comment that got me. Breaking news. Drew Lock is still trash. And I couldn't agree anymore. I think Drew Lock completely solidified that he has no business being a starting quarterback for any team in the NFL. And I can go on and on about this. I refuse to believe at this point that the competition in the preseason was even close. All that reporting we heard where it was back and forth and it was dead even. I think all of that was just theater at that point. It was something to drive the storylines, because what we've seen from Teddy Bridgewater the first few weeks, and even though he didn't have a good first half, and again, a lot of that was not having more than 2 seconds to throw the freaking ball, still, we didn't see the mistakes that Drew Lock was making. Forced passes again, overthrowing wide open receivers again, looking just frantic out there. Bridgewater hung in there, and unfortunately he got injured from one of those hits, but he remains calm under pressure. Drew Lock, he sees a flash of a jersey that's not his colors, and he panics, he bails, he doesn't know what to do. He starts looking over frantically, and he makes poor decisions. And it wasn't even just that for me. It's to me, I think it's the fact that he backhandedly used lack of reps as an excuse. And he tried, I think at one point he actually said, well, I'm not going to use it as an excuse, but then he went on and used it as an excuse. They asked him directly what's the hardest thing so far about being a backup and being in this role. And the first answer he gave without even thinking about it was lack of reps throughout the week, which I'm sorry is hot garbage. If you're going to start making excuses for your poor play based on just lack of reps, that's a you problem. You got to figure that out. If you know you're going to be the backup, you got to figure out how to be the backup and be ready to enter the second you're needed. That's the role of the backup. That's literally what their job is to be ready to come in at a moment's notice. And for you to sit there and you saw it in his body language too throughout the entire time. Every missed pass, every bad play he had, clenched jaw, shaking his head, poor body language, which portrays poor leadership. And I think that's what we've seen from Drew Lock from the start is just horrible, horrible leadership. Dancing off to the side on his own, not celebrating with the team, just bad antics all over. And I really was hoping that he would grow up some. Maybe he has. But what I saw yesterday, I think just completely solidified that if I'm the Broncos, I'm heavily, heavily, heavily considering how to trade him this offseason, how to get something out of it, draft picks, another player, who cares? But he is not a starting quarterback. And if anything, yesterday in a very limited sample size, he's not even a backup quarterback. He can't even handle that responsibility. When things don't go well, he's going to, cling to excuses and say, well, it's because I didn't get reps throughout the week. Instead of just owning his poor performance, saying, hey, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready as a backup. I wasn't ready to do my job. And I need to own that. And I need to figure out how to be better. I need to figure out how to be ready at a moment's notice instead of making these crap excuses like he did. So that's my Drew Lock rant there. And I think his future as the Denver Bronco is very limited to the end of this season. I don't think they're going to trade him midseason. I think they hold on to him for the year. But I don't see him being in a Broncos uniform past this season for all the reasons that I just gave, and even then some beyond that. He's another wasted draft pick, unfortunately, which kind of solidifies John Elway's Achilles heel that he was never able to draft a quarterback, which is a shame. But you know what? It's the past. And if we're talking about this Broncos team moving forward, new GM, we're talking about possible new ownership, all of that stuff. We have a new quarterback. Hopefully, we can sign him to a couple years after this season. We've got talent both sides of the ball now. It's time to cut ties with Drew Lock. It's time to just get over the fact that John Elway couldn't draft a quarterback and move on. Teddy Two Gloves threw a potential TD in the first quarter. Yeah, and so going back to the first quarter, the Broncos honestly did not look bad the first quarter. I think their defense did a great job shutting down the Ravens offense. Our offense, yeah, they punted a lot, but they were still, for a couple possessions, they were winning the field possession. We were able to pin the Ravens deep a couple times, started out with good field position. Teddy Bridgewater did put together a pretty solid touchdown drive. But as soon as we got that touchdown, man, it was almost like the entire team went, see, we just proved it. We proved that we're a good team. We proved that we belong. We don't need to play for the rest of the game. It was almost like at that moment, they got that touchdown. They thought they had proved their case, had shown everyone that they belong up with the best of the best, and they didn't show up for another drive after that. And I'm not even going to count that, garbage time drive where they almost got a touchdown where Drew Lock decided to throw one of his classic Drew Lock special interceptions. We're not even going to talk about that drive because that's garbage time, whatever. Defense, I have no idea what happened on their end. They were doing a solid job first quarter. And again, we got our touchdown and all of a sudden it was rough all over. Simmons got picked on a few times, got burned a few times. Our pass rush was very absent for the most part. We got to Lamar Jackson a couple times, but not nearly as much as it should have been. And obviously, as we say almost every week, I swear our special teams was garbage too. They let up that very long play towards the end of the second half that allowed for the Ravens to get that field goal. Overall, all three aspects of the game were not there after the first quarter, which again, I think if we had played as competitively as we did the first quarter, it would have been a much closer result. I'm not saying we would have won, but it wouldn't have been a 2-possession game with 2-point conversions needed with each of those touchdowns. I think it would have been a lot closer within a 1-possession game. So it's tough to see, and I think the players felt that. I think that you saw some frustration. Von Miller was saying that, hey, we need to find a way to play them again this year. And, obviously that would mean playoffs. So that would mean both teams would need to make the playoffs and the seeding would have to fall right. But the fact that they're that motivated already to want to play them again shows that they know they didn't play their best game, that they think they can play them a lot better, which I believe too. I don't know, inside the locker room, what some of those discussion points were. It almost seemed like the pass rush was a bit hesitant at times because they were afraid if they got too close to Lamar Jackson, he would have been able to find a hole and run it through. Because there are a lot of times where, again, it just seemed like they were hesitant to go full speed to try to get him. So not sure what that was all about either. But either way, it was a rough game across the board. Saw Von Miller on Saturday randomly at a golf shop. Such a good guy. Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why he's been the face of the franchise since Peyton Manning has left. He's not just a great athlete who's battled back from some adversity. He's off to a good start this year. Absolutely, he's making plays every game, and he's a good guy. I've met him before too. He's a stand-up guy for sure. Broncos are lucky to still have him. If Denver doesn't seriously make a QB move, I'm guessing Bolin is going to roll over in his grave. Here's the thing. I think Bridgewater is absolutely an option moving forward. Obviously, gear up. We're going to hear all kinds of talk about Aaron Rodgers, where he's going to go this offseason. It's going to be a huge, probably even more so talk than it was this offseason about the Broncos getting Aaron Rodgers. So that's always going to be a discussion point. However, I think, and we're only in his case 3.5 games in because he didn't play the second half. So we're only, roughly a quarter of the way through the season, with them having a 17-game season now. But in that quarter span, I think Bridgewater has done a very great job across the board to sell a point that I would not at all be upset if the Broncos kept him after this offseason for a couple more years. I think and again, just comparing him to Drew Lock, it's night and day, right? I think it's pretty apparent that the team would much rather play for Bridgewater. They're more confident under him. He looks a lot more calm and collected throughout the game. He's a lot smarter throughout the game. Again, he's played in 3.5 games. He has yet to throw an interception. And I think he's just continuing to get better each week. Again, this week, maybe not so much, but not necessarily all of his fault. He had some really good throws that, again, went right through the receiver's hands, dropped passes left and right, and was not getting much help on the protection front either. So, so the fact that he still is yet without an interception, I think he has made his case to stay the Denver Broncos quarterback for a while, which I would not be upset to see long term. Austin Lovejoy, thanks for joining us tonight. We played like trash. Lock gone now. I totally agree. Do they think anyone wants to play here if this year turns to a disaster? Here's the thing. I don't think this year is going to turn into a disaster. And I could be wrong. And I suppose if I'm wrong and we get to that point, I will gladly readdress this question for you, Austin, on a future Orange Weekly After Dark episode. However, here's what I'm going to say. And Jared and I talked a little bit about this during our tailgate talk prior to the game, which was either way the outcome of the game was going to be, we warned about overreactions, right? There's always going to be that overreaction crowd where if the Broncos had won, you would have this, group of fans saying that we're Super Bowl bound, which would have been an overreaction. But simultaneously, we're seeing some overreactions right now. Again, we were playing a Super Bowl caliber team, right? This is a team. Speaking of the Ravens, this is a team that can very feasibly end up in the Super Bowl this year. I don't think that that's a reach to say. So we were playing one of the league's best. We did not have our best game. And so, yes, there is still a gap. However, it's one game. It's one game. It's one poor performance. I'm interested in seeing how this team responds against the Steelers this upcoming week, because both teams really have something to play for right now. The Steelers are obviously fighting for their season. They're going to be at home. They're a prideful team. They're a prideful organization. And again, they're fighting for their season already. The Broncos just got kicked in the mouth. Everyone's going to continue to say for another week that the only reason why they have 3 wins, we played 3 bottom teams in the NFL, and so they're overrated. And so obviously the Broncos are going to have that pride going into the Steelers' house, trying to prove that, hey, the Steelers are still a pretty good team. No, they're not the team of the past, but they're a good team. They beat the Bills, and we need to beat them to prove our point. And so every team's going to have a bad week here and there. No team is without fault. But for me, it's always how that team responds. How do they respond to that adversity? How do they respond to getting their teeth kicked in? And I think there's going to be a showing of what character this team has. So I'm excited to see that, and hopefully I'm not let down. Hopefully they show up and show that they do have that pride, and want to prove their case that they're a playoff team this year. But I think we're far ways away from this year turning to a disaster. If this year turns to a disaster, we're talking about blowing it up again, new coaching staff. Who knows who stays after that? The whole nine. That's George Payton's issue to deal with at that point. But I honestly don't think we're going to get there. Here we are, 4 weeks in, we're 3-1. I think we are very much still on pace to make the playoffs as long as we win the games we're supposed to win. That being said, the AFC West is shaping up to be pretty dang tough. The Chargers just beat the Raiders tonight pretty handily too. At Oakland, or at Las Vegas, at Oakland there. But at Las Vegas, at the Raiders Stadium. It was, I think Chargers were home. Either way, they beat the Raiders pretty handily. And so there's now a 3-way tie for first place in the AFC West, with the Chiefs obviously only 1 game behind, and they're not going to stay there. So the AFC West is shaping up to be the toughest division in the NFL this year. So the Broncos have a fight. They obviously haven't played an AFC West team yet this year. So that's 6 games remaining. So that's basically half their schedule still, is AFC West teams. And so that's really where it's going to, could very well determine who gets those final wild card spots, or not. So we'll see. There's still a lot of season left. There's still a lot of questions to be answered. Obviously, one of the biggest questions that remain to be seen for the Broncos can we beat a good team? That is yet to be seen. But I think the answer is yes. I think this team, especially if they get a little bit healthier, they'll be able to make a strong push, and we'll be able to beat some of these tough teams. Going back to Fidel, Bowles had his first holding call in how long? What a stud, turning his career around. Yeah, exactly. And I don't even know if I agree with the call that they made. The guy he was blocking tried to do a spin move, and they both kind of spun around at the same time. And their guy just kind of fell. I saw a lot of comments that, that maybe should not have been a hold, because their guy decided to spin, and in that spinning motion is where he caught Bowles' hands and his chest at that point. So, but either way, yeah, Bowles has been outstanding last season, so far this year. He's truly turned it around, which is great to see. You don't see those cases happening too often. Normally you see it's, if somebody's turned out to be a bust, they're a bust. Very rarely do you see somebody on their very last chance to make a case to stay in the NFL? Do they not only make a case, but prove that they belong? And he absolutely has. Have injuries always messed with Bridgewater's starting job? Yeah, for the most part. Back when he was with the Vikings, I believe they had an 11-win season, made the playoffs, and they were very excited about him the next year. In the preseason, they thought they were going to have a legit, Super Bowl contending team that year. They were very excited about the potential for Bridgewater. And that's when he had that, absolutely career-threatening injury to his knee where he dislocated his knee joint, which is different than dislocating your kneecap. And so, obviously that took him out for a couple of years. And since then, it's been a battle. I think last year he was the starter for the Panthers, and that was his first kind of legit shot at starting since that injury. I wouldn't say, I don't know if I would say fortunately, because it shows our lack of having a quality backup quarterback. But fortunately for him, I don't think his starting job here is in any kind of threat in any certain way, based on what we've seen on Locke since Locke has been in the league. So hopefully we have Bridgewater back this Sunday. It's going to be close. We'll have to watch that very closely. It is possible. I'm sure if y'all remember last playoffs when Mahomes got concussed, he was cleared and ready to go for their next playoff game. But it is tight. It's a tight window. Basically, he has to start the progression tomorrow, meaning he has to be symptom-free tomorrow. For him to make all the checkpoints. He might be able to wait till Wednesday to start that progression. But either way, it's a tight window. So hopefully, again, that's a storyline we will be watching closely, because I do think if the Broncos have a chance at beating the Steelers this next week, Bridgewater is going to absolutely be a key. I'm not sure if Drew Lock can get it done. I don't know. At this point, I truly don't know if Lock can get the job done. We'll see what happens. I'm personally really pulling for Teddy to be ready, because I think that's what we need. We are an 0-1, but we can be 1-0 next week. 1-0 every week is the goal. That's a good point, right? Every week is a new week. Fangio's comment was, we're on to we're on to the Steelers. We can't have a hangover from this game. So you're right. Every week is a new opportunity. It's a new game. Where the previous week there's no weight remaining on the current game, right? At no point as the game had been playing, and they take away points or add points based on last week's performance or outcomes. So every week's a new week. This is a good opportunity for the Broncos team. Absolutely. And to Austin's point, I'm trying to believe in this team, but after Sunday that went downhill, and that's fine. I definitely think that there are more questions than answers at this point, especially, can the Broncos hold their own against good teams? But again, I was, saying without saying before the game, it was going to be a really, really tough game for the Broncos to win. And it's just because, the gap between a Super Bowl contending team and a team that's realistically for them to have a successful season this year, we're looking at a wild card game. And so the gap between those type of teams is still pretty big. And that's what we saw yesterday, especially when the Broncos make the mistakes that they made. That's why I think this next week's going to be pretty telling. I think this next week is a larger game than a lot of people might think it is. Obviously the Steelers have had struggles this year early on. They did beat the Bills, but after that they've had some concerns. So they're fighting for their season already. It's early in the season, but they're fighting for, playoff spot already. And they're home. And so this is a good opportunity for the Broncos to kind of reestablish some of that faith that this team is in the right direction. I still think they are. I do. Obviously injuries aren't favorable for the Broncos. I don't think it really held much of a weight against the Ravens, because the Ravens are also pretty beat up right now. They were pretty even on the injury chart. In fact, I think the Ravens actually had more injuries than the Broncos did. So I wouldn't use that as an excuse for this week, or for this past week, for the game against the Ravens. But it is worth noting, right, that, if this team's a bit healthier, maybe we were able to compete a little bit harder. But either way, I think, and this leads me, thank you, Daniel, for joining us. Was it just mere did Fangio fail us again? I don't think he did. I don't think this was on Fangio. I think this is on the players. Could you maybe make some arguments that Fangio didn't have his best coach game? Absolutely. I would make that argument, but I certainly wouldn't hang this loss on Fangio. I would hang this loss on the players. I would hang this loss on everyone on our offensive line, not just our two new guys, but everyone on the offensive line had their moments where they did not do their responsibility. Everyone had their moments where they let somebody by them. And so our quarterbacks hardly had a chance to get set in any drop back play. A little bit on Shermer. Why the heck we only ran the ball 4 times in the second half? I honestly don't know, especially when you bring in a quarterback who is your backup and clearly is overthrowing balls by 10, 20 yards, why you don't establish a run game. So I don't know. I don't know that either. Defensively, again, we started out good. We started out great, which to me means our game plan was solid. The game plan was good. It was working out to start with. And then our players just decided to stop. They made mental mistakes. They made execution errors across the board, all 3 aspects of the game. And for me, you can't hang that on the coach, on the head coach. And yeah, he's going to take the brunt of it. He's the head coach. And so obviously it all kind of ends at him. But here's the thing. And here's what I think is kind of epitomizes it is, the first few weeks, I think Fangio coached outstanding games, near perfect games. I think his coaching was fantastic. I think the game planning was good. I think the playing calling was great. But nobody really talked about that. Everyone, gave credit to the players, which is fine. That's totally fine. But, everyone's talking about Bridgewater and Javonte Williams and Simmons and Miller and R. Jackson and, just giving all the credit to the players was great. But then you got to hold that same story when the players fail. When the players don't show up, then you got to blame the players. You can't give all the credit in the world to just the players when things go well. And then when things don't go well, you only blame the coaching staff. I don't think it works that way. You can't pick and choose who you give credit to and who you blame. It's got to be consistent throughout the board. And so for me, again, was it Fangio's best coach game? I don't think so. I wouldn't say that. But would I say he failed us? No. I would say lack of leadership failed us. Obviously losing Bridgewater at halftime hurt because I think he's one of the best leaders on the team right now. But there was really no leadership. There was really no one who inspired anyone going into the second half. There was no one that final play of the game that's, kind of being talked about right now where, should the Ravens have run that final play or not? For me, where's the outrage on the team against ourselves? Everyone's talking about the Ravens shouldn't have ran that play. Well, why the heck are we not competing till the final whistle? The Ravens were running a play. They didn't hide the fact they were running that final play. They lined up in shotgun formation. They didn't line up in a fake victory formation and then run the ball for a few yards. It was pretty obvious to anyone the second they started lining up that they were running a legit play. So why was it when they snapped the ball that over half our defense was just standing straight up, not caring? Game's over. Who cares? Well, again, where's that leadership? Where's that leadership to get on their own team? Where's that leadership? Shoot, I would have been impressed if somebody recognized that, jumped off sides on purpose just to get the rest of the blow. You don't have a timeout. So sure, it gives the Ravens that free 5 yards, but that doesn't count as a running play. So they still have to run a play, and it gives your team a chance to reset. To me, the biggest failure, I think, wasn't Fangio. I think the biggest failure was lack of leadership stepping up. And so to this point, I think that's a future discussion. The Broncos are still 3-1. They're a 3-1 team. Fangio's not going anywhere. Not anytime soon. Not within, I would say, worst case, absolute worst case, he's gone at the bye. And that's if they lose out going into the bye week, which I don't think is going to happen. No team's going to fire a coach for being 3-1. That's just stupid. So, again, I think Fangio's, for the most part, minus last week, has coached a very great team. I think he's made really good decisions, picking Bridgewater as a starter being one of them. So, if we get to that point where the Broncos are absolutely unraveling, then sure. That's something I'd be willing to think about, who's going to take over. Do they do an interim, promote from within, whatever? But I think we're weeks away from that happening at worst. If I had my suspicion, Fangio's going to be with the team for the season. Which, by the way, going back to this, Ray, who does our Ragers podcast, which absolutely give that a listen every week if you can. Great stuff. He's a smart guy. He's a funny guy. He and I completely disagree on this. I will tell you right now, maybe one of these weeks, I'll have to get Ray to jump in and we can just have a Fangio duel for part of this After Dark show, because he is all about firing Fangio. I'll tell you that right now. We definitely disagree on this point. I think Fangio has been a great coach. I think he's given this team a chance to win every single game, and the games we don't win, it's on the players. He's been wanting Fangio gone for 5 years, and Fangio hasn't even been a coach for us that long. So maybe one of these weeks I'll bring him on as a guest, and we can kind of go back and forth on that. Big Pin's offseason workout consists of bratwurst and Twinkies. He's looking rough. I think his time's done. I think he should have retired this offseason. But hey, he didn't, and we'll see. This week we had to deal with a quarterback who was very mobile, who was a true dual threat. And this next week, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about Big Ben running 20 yards down the field untouched. There's going to be other challenges, right? I think the Steelers have a much better pass rush than the Ravens do, honestly. So we'll see how our offensive line adjusts. They're going to need to have a much better game. Regardless who's our quarterback, they're going to need to have a much better game. I do agree with that statement. And does Shermer survive the season if we start losing? Good questions. I honestly think the first coach that's going to go, if there is one that's fired in season, is McMahon. Our special teams just every single week. I have no idea why he's still on the staff. Our special teams just continuously, week after week, is rated the absolute worst, or what our bottom 3 team in the league. Every single week, we are giving up a massive special teams play, and it's infuriating, to be honest. I've ever seen the same thing over and over. So as frustrating as, and here's the thing, I don't think Shermer's play calling got bad until we got Locke in the game, right? Everything up to that point was still pretty balanced. The first 3 games, I think he called exceptional games. We got Drew Lock in there, and all of a sudden things went to crap. And so I don't know if that just means limited playbook calling with Drew Lock. If he's just incapable of understanding a larger playbook, I don't know. But I think so far what we've seen in a limited sample size is when Teddy Bridgewater is a quarterback, the play calling seems to not be an issue. It's only when Drew Lock is the quarterback that Shermer somehow can't figure out how to play call. So is that more on Locke? Is it more on Shermer? You can debate that, but either way, I don't think, again, Shermer's in trouble of losing his job yet. If there's one coach on the staff who needs to be worried about their job right now, it's McMahon, which at this point, I don't even know. Maybe he doesn't have to worry about it because he's coached an absolutely abysmal special teams for this long and still has a job. So maybe he truly feels safe. I don't know. But if I had to guess, if there was a coach to be fired in season, McMahon is probably on the hottest seat of them all. All right, guys, we're going to start wrapping up here. So go ahead and throw up any questions or final comments that you would like to make. Unfortunately, there will be no Mile High Salute this week due to the Broncos loss. But hopefully if they get a victory against Pittsburgh, we will have our 4th Mile High Salute go around of the season already, which would be fantastic for sure. Fidel, this week we had to worry about a QB who's very mobile. Next week we have to deal with a QB with T-Mobile. Man, you were on it with the comments this week. Please be sure to join After Dark every week, because these comments are absolutely making my night. That is absolutely for sure. Absolutely awesome comments. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and I'm signing off for the night. It's been great talking to you all. Be sure to tune in to the rest of our content this week. Obviously, our flagship show tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. We have podcasts coming out for you, post-game podcast from this past week and pre-game podcast outlining the Steelers coming up. We have tailgate talk before the game. We have halftime hash during halftime, and obviously Orange Weekly After Dark, which from here on out will start as soon as the Monday Night Football game is over. So whether that's 9:30, which usually it's about 9:30 tonight. Obviously, there was a bit of a delay in the game, which pushed this back. So I don't want to try to compete with Monday Night Football. I'm not quite that great yet. So look forward to this show anytime or right after Monday Night Football games. Daniel, appreciate you. It's always a great show when you guys join us. The more that you guys join and talk in the conversation, the more fun it is for me. So great show on your part as well, Daniel. Appreciate you. Appreciate everyone joining us tonight. And again, this is Orange Weekly After Dark signing off. Let's hope that this next week is better for the Broncos. Much needed to win early on. So we'll see how they do. With that being said, have a great night, everyone, and go Broncos.